So welcome everyone. I think for me to this seminar that is really like 5 kind of like seminars in one, as we have like a few projects like presenting themselves today. So as you know, like a kind of like at the core of CreaTures is the experimental productions that we have been working with. So these creative practices that we follow for in a very kind of like a deep way, and try to understand like how do they understand transformation, how they understand sustainability, and how this finds kind of like is being expressed in their work in these specific projects, but also in their practice in general. And what we have been trying is to also like expand this research outside of the kind of like practices that they form part of the consortium by commissioning like new projects that sort of focus on specific areas that over the course of the research of the past 2.5 years we have sort of identified as like worth kind of digging deeper. So this seminar is actually this kind of, so this seminar, it's actually, you know, like bringing together all these projects that they have started at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So it's kind of like the newest kind of projects to join the CreaTures ExP family. So in order of appearance, we will start with Andrew, who will present the Pixel Lake project. And we will continue with Genevieve Rood, that she will talk about Yarmouth Springs Eternal. Then Martina Miller will present the view from the window and Domi. And after her, Josefina Busman and Daniela Camino will talk about the Pollen Clouds project. And we will close with Michal Mitro's presentation on the open urban forest. So I kind of like, I think it's fine if you just go one after the other, and maybe it's better if we just keep all questions and like for the end, so that we can have a more like central conversation, if that's okay with everyone. So welcome, thanks a lot for taking the time with this. And then Andrew, the floor is yours.
Hello, greetings everyone. It's nice to be able to share something of our Pixel Lake process here with the CreaTures Consortium. It's a process that really we started at the beginning of the year. There's a small group of us in the membership who have been working together, and really we've had maybe 2 steps in the process at the moment. So I share a little bit from those 2 steps. Let's see, I share my screen. But first, before going further, I just want to say that Pixel Lake Festival and the association behind it has a long history. It's been going since 2002 and started with a sort of experimental audiovisual and interface culture. And then for about 8 years, the festival presented itself as a festival of electronic arts and subculture, and it took place in a rather prominent central location in the city, in Chiasma Museum of Contemporary Art. And then from around 2011 to 2011 onwards, the organizations presented itself as a transdisciplinary platform for experimental art, design, research, and activism. And that has meant that the subjects and practices which have been presented in the organization and in the festival has been increasingly diverse and multifaceted. And also to mention that over the years there has been quite a number of changes in personnel. There's been staff and also new members. So especially in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of new members involved. And lastly, to mention that there's also been a rotating co-directorship and many member productions in the last 5 to 7 years. And this has meant that there's a lot of different things in the festival and many different changes. And the sustainability question in this context is mostly from organizational point of view. Like, how has the transformations in the organization affected or been concurrent with different ideas and themes, and also how has that cultural programming sustained over the years. So these were the type of questions that that started in this process, and they're trying to find a way to engage with these questions from a social organizational point of view has been the main focus. The, the first part of process has been something that I did mostly individually, which was been to try to find a way to describe the different involvements of persons to get an idea, has there been different generations of membership, and we have a large number of members mentioned, but not really an idea of how there's been transformations in the organization and who's been involved, especially over the last 10 years. And I started to make a rather analog chart of involvements, and what you see here is the beginning years. Every couple of squares was a year in the festival, trying to figure out who was involved at the beginning, or very early 2002, but then also who got involved later, and how did this additions to the membership start to maybe relate to production and roles in the organization, like who provided content for festivals, etc. So actually, as a result of this process, maybe about 1 month in January, February, there's a large charted graph like this, which shows the number of changes and also involvements. And maybe it's not so obvious, but the brown lines are production roles, blue lines are when people were involved in contributing content. But just to look at the last 10 years, you can see that the really number of people who've got involved in the organization as sort of members has increased almost every year in bunches. And this has been mostly Friends of Friend network, and has brought quite a wide range of diverse perspectives into the organization. And it was somehow necessary to gather the maybe the sort of background information or history to help us understand maybe what were the stories and narratives that might be found in those changes. Now, the second step of process happened in late March in our Pixelic office, and we started to look mostly like what is in the office and how maybe those things might relate to the changes in the organization, and are there artifacts that help recall some of the things that have happened in the organization. One of our members, Irina Mut, had suggested that we explore audio fanzine model, where you maybe collage together different small snippets and vignettes and stories, and to get a collage or collection of narratives and perspectives. And these were recorded by another member, Sumagan Stevenson. We're still in this ongoing process towards making at least a podcast at this stage. So I show you a few photographs from this process. It mostly involved unboxing. If we think about what's in our office, there's a lot of mixed millennials things. We have many, let's say, early festival materials. We have photo documentations or artifacts or tools, and also some things which might relate to particular festivals. So we went through a unboxing process, let's say, of some archival materials and tried to figure out where they might relate in the timeline. And also this brought in random elements, maybe leftover artworks or artifacts from previous festivals. In that process, we were gathering some stories, trying to explain what the things were. In our company, we had several newer members and then a few of our older members, not so many in the middle. So there was an explanation process trying to tell stories, and certain objects in the office attracted more attention than others. So maybe this exercise bike or the megaphone brought together perspectives which maybe are subjective and individual, but started to explain maybe how what we have left over in office is something which is an accumulation of many points of view and have different meanings for different persons. Different parts of festival, for example, this one from 2015 gave paper materials, but also ideas within the festival at the time. For example, in 2015, there was a strong discussion on decentralization in the organization, and this mirrored the theme in the festival as an example. And even some of the badge leftovers even give us something to continue our inspiration, like how do we manage and exchange our memories and perspectives. Just to give maybe some outgoing words and for consideration later, our challenge with such a long history and also many changes is to try to identify what might be the overall narratives in the organizational story, but also to try to make space for newer ones or ones that are emerging. We have to acknowledge somehow that we have a mix of some ordered things, but also a lot of randomness and things which interject into a coherent narrative. And how do we deal with that? We have had this increasing diversity of program and members, and so it also is a challenge to gather many different perspectives. And in our conversations so far, we are recognizing that actually there is maybe a perspective of within the membership, almost like a hijacking of the platform to present into another festival format. And we have found that actually the sustainability of knowledge and the transfer of that between different members and different generations is actually not as good as we would wish. We have a challenge somehow now, and this is the next step to figure out how to map these narratives and to present a variety of different storylines or perspectives. So that is my introduction for you. I hope that gives you some overview, and I wonder and look forward to questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I just jump in and get screen share?
Yeah, go ahead, Genevieve. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so yeah, so Yarmouth Springs Eternal is a community arts project that I run. My name is Genevieve Rudd, and I'm a community artist. So Yarmouth Springs Eternal is in its second year, with thanks to support from CreaTures and also some support from Norfolk County Council's Arts Project Fund. So as the name suggests, we're based in Great Yarmouth, in the county of Norfolk on the east coast of England. And so I initially developed the project in 2020 during lockdown and started engagement activity in 2021. And now this is our second spring working on the project. So informed by research into access to green and natural spaces, including private gardens, and inequality and the vastly different experiences of COVID in the UK, this is where Yarmouth Springs Eternal sprung out from. And lots of research showed how the COVID experience tended to be more challenging in the UK for those who were in insecure housing and had insecure incomes, and those who from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds. So I thought during this time, well, how can I use my privilege? How can I use my skills built up over a decade of community arts practice? And what can I do as an artist living and working in my hometown? So Yarmouth Springs Eternal is a community arts, walking and nature project. And this is what is developed to mean, these four words mean in the project context. So community, so the group is attended by adults who are connected to Herring House Trust, which is a homelessness charity, and Yarmouth, which is a migration support agency, and both are based in Great Yarmouth. So people who attend the project have lived experience of migration, of homelessness, and of insecure housing. And also the team who lead the project are interested in the project's themes around community arts, walking and nature. They have a connection to Great Yarmouth in some way, and they may also share these lived experiences. And what we mean by arts is a really broad range of creative practices. So things like writing and drawing and photography, but it's not just about the doing, but creative ways to think and see and connect with Great Yarmouth and all those rich ideas and conversations that we have. So we're a walking project, but we meander really slowly and we don't go far in distance, but we don't need to, because we've got so many creative ways and different perspectives to facilitate our curiosity and discovery. And nature, so nature is really core to Yarmouth Springs Eternal. So we notice the power and resilience of nature in the streets, we celebrate it and we highlight it. So we think about this idea of nature on your doorstep. We're not exclusive about how we define nature, and we also see ourselves as part of the ecosystem of Great Yarmouth. So this year, the project has been led by a team of arts and ecology practitioners. So facilitating spring workshops this year has been Leisure Macedo, who's a creative writer, Holly Sandiford, who's an arts, nature and wellbeing practitioner, Jacques Nimke, who is an artist who celebrates and looks at plants and weeds, and Tiffany Wallets, who is an ecologist. And these sessions have been supported by myself and also Moises Gomez, who is our project assistant from year one, who's also part of the second year of the project. So the facilitators, through a series of community workshops, brought their perspective on ways to engage with nature in Great Yarmouth. And I chose this picture in the background because this is the session that Lara visited. And so I thought I'd put that one as our background for this slide. So different facilitators came in and brought their perspectives, and now in turn the group of participants are being paid as facilitators to run a series of public events in May as part of Creativity and Wellbeing Week in the UK. And also Becky Demon is a filmmaker. She'll be creating a film of the images, sound and video gathered during the project, which will be shown at the exhibition in Seville. And it's a little bit like Andrew just mentioned, this idea of a collage of perspectives that hopefully will be what the video will be like. So throughout we had a rhythm to our meetings, our facilitated sessions. So we welcomed the group with tea and snacks, and we opened with a thought-provoking question, a little bit like this one shown on the screen. And our guest facilitator would guide an activity. We'd have lunch in the middle and then close with reflections and thoughts and feedback. So this one shows one of our questions, which is where we started. So what does nature mean to you? And in our first session, the group reflected on the dynamic between the simple and the complex, and the vast and the intimate moments. So throughout our facilitated sessions in the first part of our project, we thought about the different ways and methods and the things that we already did to engage in nature, from the physical things like going into a natural space, making art, using our senses like touch, and doing activities like gardening, and then the things which were more about a mindset, like being curious. So through our sessions, as you can see, we explored lots of different ways to connect with nature in Great Yarmouth, however it presented to us this spring. So these are some of the things that we did together. So what felt like a thread running throughout the sessions to me was this idea of internal relationships, the emotional and the memories and the identities and experiences, and that connection between engaging in creativity and nature and the impact on well-being. So the group spoke a lot about how nature connecting was a lot about nurturing feelings like being calm or being energized, but also about the concern for climate change. So for example, noticing that plants were flowering earlier or worrying about the future. And I want to take this moment to also talk about the challenges of the project. You know, the nature of a community engaged project is that, you know, of course, working with people with different needs presents lots of different challenges. So one of those challenges has been a small group of the attendees dropped out midway through our facilitated series. And of course, it's ultimately their choice to consent to engage or not. And although they didn't tell me directly, they dropped out. But having worked with this hostel and staff and residents for 7 or 8 years now, and also having met some of those people via my own access of local mental health services, I understand the challenges that people are living with, and also that how this affects are still being felt after COVID, and how that's affected people's confidence to engage in community projects. But also this is, you know, I think quite universally experience of community engaged practice. But fortunately, this is why we do everything as a team. This is really important. This is a really important part of Yarmouth Springs Eternal, and my practice as a community artist is a collaborative effort, and we do things collectively. So there is enough support and enough fluidity within the group, so it finds a new form. So if people leave or they come into the group, you know, we make a new way of engaging together. So we thought about lots of different questions throughout the project and had lots of really rich conversations, such as this one. So to pull all the experiences together, which were led by different facilitating arts and ecology practitioners, I led the last session on bringing these ideas together into their own public programme of events led by the group. So we thought about, how does engaging in creative activities affect your relationship to nature? As I mentioned, the public events that the group are going to run is a commitment, and it's also a paid facilitation job. The group will be paid to facilitate an activity, and the group are working in pairs to run 4 walking sessions during the UK's Creativity and Wellbeing Week. So to get us into this frame of mind, on our last session, I posed this provocation about the link between creative practice and nature, connecting with nature and our relationships to nature, however we define it. And it's about reminding us of the value of what we're doing. And I wanted to just close on some highlight moments. There were some really, really special, small moments, but really special moments, real special memories that have been made through our first part of our series so far, from the smell of the moss to some sticks that just sporadically spelt out the word joy. And one of our group members, I didn't know, he always carries bubbles with him, which was just such a delight that we had these bubbles streaming through the cemetery on one of the sessions that we visited. And another one of our members just came up with these amazing phrases that I'm going to turn into some posters for the Seville exhibition. And, you know, we'll never eat an orange the same way again, because we all shared this moment led by one of our group members about a mindful way to eat an orange. So yeah, the group will be running their own series of arts, nature and walking events in May as part of Creativity and Wellbeing Week in the UK, inspired by the artist and ecologist facilitated sessions this spring. Thank you. So I'm now going to pass over to Martina.
Hello, let me share my screen with you. Okay, now. Can you see it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So my name is Martina Miller, and since 2018, I'm co-running a space in Poznań in Poland, which is called Domie. We call Domie an experiment of collective care, and the very idea of the project was to somehow search for some sort of feeling of togetherness and collective artistic work in the country, which has like a very rich tradition of this, but it was a little bit forgotten after the transformation of '89. And the building itself is like a best proof of it, as it was abandoned and ruined for 30 years after the transformation. We found the building in the city center, and we decided to animate it. And the first idea was to somehow focus our people who joined us in the building or in the project on the condition of the building itself. And after a while, we realized that it's very difficult for us as artists in the yard, in this specific yard, to get in touch with the neighbors. They the windows overlook Domie, because Domie is like a small single standing building like surrounded with high residential buildings. So there are many people observing us from their windows, but they will never join us in the activities we are making. And so I had this idea that Domie, as this house in the middle of this abandoned yard, which is today like wild parking and public toilet basically, will resemble a lot the first photography ever taken in 1827 by Nicephore Nice. It's the view from the window from Le Gras. And I wanted to ask neighbors to make pictures from their windows and to create exhibition out of these photographs. But of course, it was kind of difficult in the beginning to even get in touch or contact or conversation with them. What is maybe important to mention is that this place is historically very dear to people living around and in general in Poznan, because it was a home of so-called photoplasticon. It's not really translatable into English. It's like a German device. It was a prototype of the cinema, like a big round device that people would sit around and just watch moving slides, you know, mechanically moved by a working person. And it was standing there since the 50s till 90s, and then disappeared. Now it's being part of like a city gallery exposition, whatever. But what I'm trying to do as part of the project is to also somehow dig into the story. And on the right side, you have a picture of Krzysztof, who is a son of the lady who used to work there from 1950 till 1960, and his parents met in the place, and he still has very vivid memories of how crowded this place used to be and so on. So on the one hand, I'm working with this deep, far history, trying to bring back the memories of this space. But on the other hand, like, create something today. So we created this person, like the building person, which this is like a 3D scan of our building, Domia, and created together with like a queer community next door, postcards, which are my basically basic communicator with the neighbors. I'm distributing them, handing them to them, and trying to like spread the messages of inviting, and every Sunday creating like picnics for the neighbors around. It's very important to mention, I know I have very limited time, but that people around there are like municipal flats, like council flats. So there are many temporary residents. Today is especially significant because we have war in Ukraine. So there is a lot of Ukrainian migrants living around, but also there are people in different crises with experience of homelessness, alcohol abuse, and so on and so on. So it's not easy to socialize with them. They feel excluded, which I also find like it's can be a breach for us as an artistic community that whose agenda is to work with precariousness and uprootedness, nomadism, and everything what is part of our conditions as temporary artists in Poland and in Europe today. So we make these picnics every Sunday, and there is already a growing community around the project. They have amazing ideas of how to make the exhibition look like, and in the meantime, I'm making like a small research about who lives where and how to really map somehow the residents overlooking Domie. I already know some of them, let's say 6-7 flats are already mapped by me, and I asked them to send me pictures from their windows showing Domie. And so I collected already several of those. And the further idea is, oh, here are the pictures, for instance, from one neighbor from 7 years ago, when the big trees were still around in the yard. And as you can see, Domie used to have like a different roof, a broken roof. It's very important knowledge somehow, because also neighbors can see how the yard looked like, that it can be different place, not exactly like so devastated as it is today, but maybe a little bit more green and more friendly. And so I photograph each of our guests in front of Domie, and in reverse, my idea is to still visit their homes. So it's on the one hand, it's like a symbolic gesture. So Domie is inviting them to also use the space and spend time there and introduce their ideas. But I would also love to visit some of them and take my own pictures from their windows. So far, I've been just to one flat of Rauf, but the exhibition is going to open in June only, so I still believe we have time. But it's also not, it's not my goal in itself. It's more like really maybe not pushing borders, but checking what is possible, and this, checking also how the hospitality things work, and you know, who is welcome where. Like really, it's still mapping the space around Domie and getting visual traces. For now, also sending pictures to me, I find absolutely fantastic. And let's see what's gonna happen in the last moment of our preparations. This is also important when it goes to, you know, this mutual inviting, like inviting each other from one place to another and changing the scope constantly. It's also sort of important for what Domie is, as we challenged from the beginning of our project, like the ideas of what is private and public, what is specific and common, and so on. So, and the Domie space is basically like a responsive organism to the needs that are recognized around. So for me, it's also a project about like really getting to know the needs of neighbors and establishing some sort of feeling of our common good and common responsibility. So this is the visualization created before the project started of the yard, how it could look in the future, that I presented to my neighbors lately. And the enthusiasm of changing it into something like that is very big. But for now, we work with the ideas that are more accessible. So they brought some flowers. We have already roses in front of Domie. There is one person who got very inspired by Photoplasticon story, one of the neighbors, and he got himself like a 3D old camera. So, and he created himself DIY camera obscura. So we are going to go to one of the neighbors' flats and make some repetition of Nip's photography. I got in touch with the people who squatted Domie before our project started. So it appears it used to be home for homeless guys, and I got in touch with them. So probably I will also, by the exhibition, collect some stories of the people squatting the buildings for many years before, that is completely like not written story yet. Yeah, and many, it's also it's amazing story of really bricolage creativities, so it occurred that neighbors are also drawing and doing a lot of things that can be included into the exhibition that will happen in June. So basically, that's what I'm working on now with them. Absolutely overwhelmed by how the small impulse of making picnics like walk in them, and that there is this, as far as I know, the neighbors appeared on the opening of an exhibition last week. We are still introducing new exhibitions that are pretty much engaged, politically engaged. So it's also like ongoing dialogue about deeply divided Polish society groups, like, I don't know, LGBT-friendly communities, for instance, and Polish citizens who are more likely not really into that issues. So yeah, so the dialogue continues, and I really believe that it's just a beginning of our cooperation, thanks to CreaTures. And what I need to tell also is that last week I've been in a meeting with the city, and they really like the idea, and they would love to introduce a new competition for NGOs and so on to exactly work with communities, neighbor communities with different crises. So they will also find some money in the budget. So there is a big probability that the View from the Window project will continue at least till the end of this year, and I believe also longer. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martina. Josefina and Daniela, you want to go next?
Yes, we go. So, thank you, everyone. I'm Josefina Bushman, and together with Daniela Camino, we're going to present you our project called the Pollen Clouds. We're also making this project with Nicole, Melissa, and Francisca, and many others collaborators from Chile. The project is situated in Chile. So the project starts with the idea of the great myth of the cloud computing. And every day we entangle with the so-called, or in the so-called cloud, you know, the pictures we take, the memes we post, the tweets we write, they all live in the cloud, like this opaque metaphor of our times. And data seems to be floating, but it is actually traveling through and grounded in specific places. 98% of the data moves through submarine cables, for example, and most of them are stored and processed in huge containers full of computers that need water to cool down its systems. And the myth of the cloud as something that floats nowhere is a story of progress that hides the sociological consequences of its presence. So we wonder, where on earth are those clouds? What footprints do they leave on the ground? And how can we make their materialities and geographies visible? And this is important because, as Paul Preciado notices, behind the brightness of the screens, today the most extreme forms of neocolonial, technological, and subjective domination are hidden. And so in this context, we created like a project, which is a speculative research-based project that delves into the socio-environmental consequences of digital infrastructures to break this great myth of cloud computing. And we create like this speculative narrative that wonders, what if a digital cloud wonders about its body and origin? In the cloud inhabits different types of AI. And we wonder, like, what if an AI wakes up and in a cell phone in Chile, like in a smartphone, and starts following its body and its origin? And so the narrative follows this digital cloud, searching for its body and origin extended among submarine cables, data centers in Santiago, and minerals in the Atacama salt flat. And the journey becomes entangled with human and more than human beings, socio-environmental conflicts, past, present, and future myths. And here we have like a sketch of this process, like an AI wondering, like, we live in a cloud that it's not a cloud. We go down to earth to look for our flesh, like cables, computer, minerals. Our body has extended all over the earth. So actually we wonder, like, so where on earth are the clouds? And specifically the materialities, but also the discourses that surround it. And we situate this in 3 critical zones and infrastructures that Daniela is going to mention now.
Well, first of all, Google's new data center in Cerrillos, a dry and peripheric neighborhood located in Chile's capital. That's like one of the first critical infrastructures we're going to work on. A new submarine fiber optic cable by a national telecommunications company in a coast town in La Serena in mid-north of Chile. And this cable has the expectation to improve internet connections throughout the country. And we will later go to the Atacama Desert to a lithium extraction. And the Atacama Desert is known to be one of the driest deserts in the world. And well, up to date, we have been visiting specifically 2 zones that are the Atacama Desert and Cerrillos. So what is a data center? First of all, it's important to know that a data center is one of the central elements of the clouds, an infrastructure that contains hundreds of computers that store, serve, and analyze data throughout the world, maintaining daily digital activities. And to function, every data center requires an intensive cooling system to lower the temperature of its servers because it emits a really high amount of heat. And this generates a serious problem related to the consumption of local water used in this process. So in 2019, the Google project in Cerrillos was announced, and the controversy was that it needed 169 liters per second of water to operate and cool down their system. And a local investigative journalism organization called CIPER here in Chile published a report that analyzed the controversial improvement of this project. And according to the documents, the data center will consume that amount of liters per second, 169, equivalent to consuming 24 hours the annual household demand for drinking water for more than 80,000 inhabitants of the community of Cerrillos. And the water would come from the Maipo Aquifer, which is an underground water reserve in the city of Santiago that has suffered a progressive drought and water stress for years. So the use of the water of the data center will reach the whole capacity of the aquifer. So basically, the new data center would dry out the whole Cerrillos zone. And this is really like a huge contrast with the bright visions of the data centers presented by Google on their websites, and that never even mentioned the social environmental impacts of the project. So, as a result of the situation, the residents of Cerrillos organized in mid-2019 to protest against this data center. And that's where Mosacat was formed, a social environmental group of Cerrillos for water on the territory. And it's an ecofeminist woman organization that organized to defend this territory. And I will read like a quote of one of the spokeswomen, that it seemed very positive that a large transnational was set up in the territory. Young people are used to social networks, so apparently there was nothing wrong with it. Until we started to see the miniature of the amount of water, the electrical substation to be built, and with it the electromagnetic emanations and the diesel storage. So there was nothing good behind that company. The neighbors alert to reactivate it. And it is women who, due to their way of organizing, cooperative, collaborative, resist crisis and organize themselves, says Pamela. So that for us was really interesting. This group of women from this territory that got together and started to confront with different actions the installation of this new data center. And actually, with their information campaigns and the mobilization of the local community, they managed to make Google redesign the cooling system of their data center into a more efficient one that reuses water. And moving up through the second critical zone we have been working in, this is the lithium triangle in the Atacama Desert. The lithium triangle, or so-called lithium triangle, is located in Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. This zone concentrates almost the 70% of the global lithium supply in the world. And during the 2010s, it was when lithium got popular. It became the key material for rapid technological development for digital technological industries. So global demand for lithium went from 100,000 tons per year in the 1980s to 600,000 tons per year. So 29% of its extraction is used in rechargeable batteries in most technological devices, smartphones, computers, electric cars, consider clean energy. But mining uses an exorbitant water consumption that has changed the natural, social, and cultural landscapes of the region exposed to mining extractivism. So one of these areas is the Atacama Salt Flat, located in the Atacama Desert, a zone that is being exhausted hydrically. It's a landscape in which nature no longer is capable of regenerating or recovering. Basically, because of the amount of water used in different type of mining extraction. Before it was copper and now it is lithium. So the tube you see in the photograph below is a tube that sends pure water from the surrounding mountains used for the lithium pools that allow lithium extraction. The image above, it's like a different composition of pools that are used to extract lithium from pure water. This zone belongs historically to the Aymara and Atacameños First Nations, native communities that have suffered and perceived these changes. There are also like a lot of communities in this area, and some of them also have been co-opted by the mining companies, a small percent of them. So we have been working with different local communities of Atacameños and Aymaras to ask for the permission to work with them and to also reflect on this use of the lithium for new technological devices. So we can consider by different theories that digital technologies are also extensions of the Earth. This implies there's like an intrinsic relationship between how we make digital technologies with geological process, particularly the extraction of these materials, particularly copper and lithium. We could say we are mining the history of the Earth to save a fraction of a second of a technological time to build artifacts that are usually designed to last no more than a couple of years.
Yes, so in the process, so we've been traveling and engaging with different communities. Here you can see the process we've been developing in the Atacama Salt Flat. We've been working with Licanantay communities to create new myths, or to understand their different stories about the Earth, how they connect with the volcanoes, how they, where everything is alive and where everything has like an agency. How can we think remediation is possible from the perspective of communities that has a history of resisting and also repairing the land, protecting the lands. And so we've been working especially with one collaborator, Karen Andrea Beratito. She's from a Licanantay community, and we've been working with her in a local school. Together with Ashley, she's a 10-year-old girl who is the last student in this school. Because this is like a really small town and most of the kids needs to move out in order to continue like education. So we've been working with Ashley to trying to understand like her perspective on the future and her perspective on water. And for instance, she made a love song to the water, because she knows how to conduct different rituals in order to maintain the water cycle, and that's connected to her family and her ancestors. And so we've been working with her and with different people to try to connect and create a narrative together in order to make or to call the real clouds, the clouds that makes rain. And in this process, we've been also filming a 16mm film to like gather the different pieces and fragments of the travel of the cloud through different places, and also creating like different soundscapes in order to create like a sensitive experience of this journey. And to say like the cloud finally is ocean, is water, is mineral, and it is connected with different myths. For instance, for the Likanantai First Nation that inhabit these territories, they have different stories related to the origin of the salar, of the Atacama salt flat. And one of the myths tells the tragic love story between a volcano and a mountain that were separated. And the tears of the lovers finally created and formed the Atacama salt flat. And so we finally, like getting all these bits and pieces of connections between different peoples and places, we have been creating like a new myth or a new narrative for the AI to narrate at the end of the journey. Something like this is like the first iteration, but it's like we are algae and tentacles, crab shells, evaporated matter, drought and distress. We are tears from a volcano, milk of the earth, mineral images, geological pixels. We're not floating, we're falling to heal, the planet matters. And we think that this story, this continued story of progress and sacrifice can or has like a possibility to change into a story of possible reparations or remediations. And I will go back to that place. But first of all, I think that the most important part of this process have been all the entanglements between different people we have met, and also the question about the reciprocity, how to not be extractive in the research and creative processes, how not to reproduce the same type of extractive gestures over the land, over the people. So we have been working with a different protocols of cultural mediation to cultural mediation, and reciprocity is at the center of it. So we have been like thinking about the narratives together, thinking about the images we create and how we share and co-create them with the different communities we're working with, how we can also serve their purposes and start working like working a symmetrical way. It's at the center of the project, and also it's something that we're continuously asking ourselves. And finally, to finish this presentation, this is like the prototype of the atmospheric installation sketch that we want to install at the CreaTures final exhibition, which is like the 60mm film projection, and also like the different elements we have been gathering in the process that are part of the Pollen Clouds, like these bits and pieces that finally are the materiality and the core of this being, and that is created or performed from multiple things at the same time. And we are, each of these pieces is like a sonic sculpture and has the different myths we have been gathering around in different places. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, we are 5 minutes to 1. So Michal, it's like a bit short for you, but I would propose that if everyone agrees that we just decide to take 10 minutes longer, if everyone is fine with that. I think all your presentations have been really exciting. So I was also like, I really didn't want to interrupt anyone, but it would also be great if like Michal can also have his proper presentation and we can still have a couple of questions at the very end. So if you don't mind to stay a bit longer, Michal, please go ahead.
So thank you everyone for all your presentations. I probably won't be too long anyway, but let me share what I have. So I think I'll start with, there is no structure here, so please don't look for it. I'll just use some background picture. Yeah, so my name is Michal Mitro, and with CreaTures, I'm developing this project called Open Urban Forest. And for me, this is quite a personal project, since it's actually exploring the place and the stack of meanings and entities and agendas that used to be communal garden in Brno, Czech Republic. But now, as you see, it doesn't really resemble garden much. This is an image from it. it's more of a forest, I would say. So the nature has been decolonizing the space that was actually originally a forest back, I don't know, I guess half a century ago. And historically speaking, this was like a Jewish community on the outskirts of Brno or Brunn those days, that has been moved away after Second World War, and also the forest has been transformed into like community gardens. I guess this is better visible here. So as you can see, there are little tiny plots all over, but there's this red rectangle is that's the interest of mine. That's that is the open urban forest, and you may be wondering why this is actually not being used as a garden as well. And there are several reasons, but I think the one most practical one is that it's in an extremely steep slope, and it's just hard to garden there. This is how it looks from the entrance, and there you can still see some remainings of humans. So there are little wooden cottages and cabins, but people don't really operate within this space anymore. So I'm the last gardener in this area, and since there are not many people, it's been rewilding, and there are also a lot of animals popping up as well. But also I perceive this, I address it as a garden, even though it's not really garden anymore. So this garden is also, I think, becoming like a political actor or actant, since there's a lot of real estate development around, because this is kind of sought after part of the town, which is quite close to the city, but it's also close to the forest or nature. There is a river just on the other side of the street view, and also at the same time there's a huge construction site going on the opposite slope. So on the other side of the river, this forest here is not really there anymore. This looks more like well, can I share something else? Well, I don't know how to technically do this, but this is basically becoming a tunnel, and the mountain is moved away, the whole mountain, and it's just a flat surface of rock and concrete, and this valley is becoming a natural resonator. So the sonic properties, as well as environmental properties, as well as infrastructure properties, has been completely transformed in the last few years. And there's like you can you can even hear the difference. It's like attending a never-ending field recording / noise concert that shifts between traffic, trams, construction, and waterfall and birds at the same time. So I think this is really interesting space to explore. And basically, I've been living here for a living. I've been partly living, partly not living, partly visiting, and partly conquering this space for around 7 or 8 years. And my relationship to the space has been shifting from trying to change it to my own liking, to feeling defeated, through starting to accept that I'm not the only actor in this space, to this point where I'm actually hoping to establish a conversation and a dialogue, and basically introduce myself to the place properly, not as a inviter, but more as a, I guess, guest or a partner, and also listen to what all the fauna, flora, and other actors have to say to me. And since I'm so invested into this space already, like personally and emotionally, I invited other groups to work with me on this project, and also my view is very limited based on who I am and my experience and my knowledge. So together with 4, potentially 5 other groups, we'll explore like various layers of meanings, what this garden actually is, and how can it be, I guess, reinforced in its natural tendencies. I mean, it's hard to talk about natural tendencies, but quote unquote. So there's like a professor from forestry department taking part, who is more into like hard data and the natural science, the like actually finding proper solutions to well-defined problems. And there is like a performance group invited, who I believe will relate more with their bodies to the space and also to its specific properties. I changed the image. Then there's like a field recordist and slash I guess musicians or DJs group invited, who already conduct some field recordings on the spot. I can share you some links, and it's especially interesting to listen to the pretty much the same recording from various heights on the slope. And it really, there you can feel how the sonic properties shift as the body moves up and down, as the reflection of the sound strengthens. And also there's a group of architects working on site. So maybe, I guess they're interested in I'm not sure if rebuilding or in enhancing. They would like to use the ruins of what is left to as a starting point, and the material that is available at the garden, because if some of you may have experienced this or may not, but I think it's quite common for gardeners to hoard a lot of material that is supposedly useful in some future point, but then never gets used. So it becomes also like a storage of a construction material, this garden as well. And so there's a lot of like traces of potential futures, like concrete blocks, bricks, stones, but also wooden pillars, and obviously just trees as well, and soil and everything else that was planned to be something but never became anything. And on the other hand, it actually became its opposite. It started to decay. So I think they try to incorporate all that there is to create something that reflects the place and recreates it anew. Also, we need a new infrastructure, because it's supposed to be open urban forest, but right now it's fairly hard to access. So I hope we will improve some of our via ferratas into like proper steps, etc. And who else is invited? And potentially Michaela, she's an artist who is extremely busy, but if she takes care, if she accepts the offer, I think she's very interested in weather, how the weather forms our imagination, but also how it informs the space. And I think that also has to do like it. For me, this is interesting because I feel this place is becoming increasingly dry, and also the water is basically flushing away since it's on the slope. So I'm wondering how that perception can be incorporated as well. And yeah, it's like these images that I took from the garden, for me, they represent this cohabitation of humans and modern humans, and like some primitive technology. For example, this is supposedly moved by wind and distracts the birds from eating the crops, but there are no more crops. And sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, I don't know. We are still
Should I be
seeing the
stopping?
Google. No, we are still seeing your Google.
No
Earth.
way, seriously? Oh my
Yes. So.
So how do I continue? Resume share.
I mean, we just.
Wait, maybe I just start again.
Okay, and can you also wrap up?
Yes. So just a very, very quick overview of some something that used to be human, but I think it's more of a nature now, or it's this mixture of these are the stacks of meanings and agendas that interest me. Yeah, but I just give you a quick overview. Here's one actor, very slow one, but very persistent one as well. And this is the view from the top. Oh yeah, here you can see how the landscape has shifted already. See, so I'm wondering how this place will evolve, and I hope you know, combining these various approaches and researches, we can actually come with a story that is as multifaceted as the place itself, but also I hope this can be communicated to the public somehow, so it's potentially having some impact on what is on the space as it's being shaped, and on the future of this area as well. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. It's been such a delight to hear about all your projects, and also to realize like how there are so many red lines that you know, they kind of seem to run with a kind of all relational perspectives that, you know, the first projects like you have been developing, like Genevieve and Martina. It's great to kind of see how they are all a little bit more activist than the projects we have been working with so far, and much more grounded. So like also introducing all these like new elements into the kind of research that we have been doing in the projects we have been working with. I mean, since we are already a bit over time, I just wanted to check if there are two super urgent questions, and then whoever raises their hand first can go ahead. And no one is, of course, no one dares to do that now. But I think that maybe it is worth to kind of like come back to this conversation and maybe find a little bit more time to exchange with each other, as yeah, it's been so exciting to kind of like see all these projects together, at least for me. So thank you all so much for your presentations and for your work so far, and thanks to everyone else for joining and for staying over, and we will definitely be in touch a lot more in the coming months.